Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, August 12th, 2025, and today we will talk about the importance of visiting, but also showing your own farms. Plus, it's the flea beetle episode, so let's get jumping. See what I did there? With the jumping thing with like the fleas? Let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year will be brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil. If you're looking for compost or propagation mix, check out tilthsoil.com. Link in the show notes. I hope your weeks are off to a good and healthy start. I got more lettuce planted yesterday. That's pretty much a constant around here, but I also got some beets in the ground for the fall, plus that Napa cabbage and kale started in trays that I talked about. We have dried up here quite a bit on the weather front recently, so that's been one of the main challenges this latter half of the season, but a drought is to be expected at least part of the year. Every year, we are less feast or famine and a bit more feast and famine here in Kentucky. It's subtle, but there is a difference. Anyway, remember this week, your 20-second video prompt to send to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com is a sort of bless this mess prompt. And the response to these sort of 20-second videos in general actually got me thinking about the importance of seeing other farms in person. Now, we live in a world of unmitigated curation these days and really have for the last like 15-ish years, where only the best stuff is posted, so we only see the best stuff and are left with this impression that the best stuff is all there is on that farm. Honestly, I'm probably as guilty of this as anyone. For instance, I will show you this awesome planting of teff beneath the okra, but maybe not the weeds around the lettuce planting to the right of it. Or I will show you how I use this or that tool, but not what my tool shed looks like in August when I have mostly just given up on organization, clearly just so I have something to do this winter. Anyway, there is a lot of value in seeing other people's farms. For one, farm size is hard to ascertain in videos or photos. Most small farms feel very small when you are on them. I remember visiting, J.M. Fortier and Madeleine de Roche's farm in Quebec back in, 2019. There is a ton going on there, but the actual footprint of that farm is not very big. It's like an acre and a half or something, I think, where the actual production takes place. So it looks quite small, especially with a house like smack dab in the middle of it. Same thing here. Our actual garden space, when it was at full tilt, felt enormous to us because we were the ones that had to tend it. But when people would come to visit, I think they would feel somewhat inspired by how small that actual footprint is, that you don't really need a ton of land to make this kind of farm happen. I think there are also a lot of good details that can be gleaned from just seeing inside of a pack shed or a shed and seeing how the tools are organized or hung up, how the row cover is kept, how the seedling trays are managed, all of that stuff. To me, it is really worth it, if you can do it, to see working farms up close when they offer tours. Now, don't just show up on a farm and ask for a tour. Please absolutely never do that. Farmers are busy and have their days mapped out. But if a farm or farm organization is doing a tour somewhere and you have any desire to start a farm business, there is a ton that can be gleaned from that experience, even if you're busy and it's hard to find the time to get away. Now, all of that may sound obvious to you, which fair, but I think it's also worth emphasizing that sometimes you might look at a farm tour coming up and think, well, that's not really my style of farm. I don't need to go visit that one. It's too big or it's too conventional or whatever. But you truly can pick something useful up from every farm you visit, even if it's just something simple like a mistake they made with their irrigation and how to avoid that, or a business mistake or a trick with a tractor or whatever. Or conversely, maybe they introduce you to a compost supplier that absolutely rocks that you'd never heard of. We didn't offer any tours this past year because, well, I effectively worked 2 full-time jobs and didn't really have the time as I got used to doing the show, but hopefully I can in the future again, because not only is there value in seeing farms, there's a lot of value in showing your own farm and having to explain your systems, for instance, and frankly, having an excuse to clean up the dang tool shed. Anyway, this year or up next year, make it a point to host some farm tours as much as you go on some farm tours, and if it costs a little bit to go on a farm tour or host one, that's fine. Have a little fee, ask people to chip in, especially if it's in the growing season when half a day spent cleaning and then showing someone around your property can have hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of ripple effect down the line because the farmer was not planting or seeding or whatever that day. Anyway, not sure that added anything to any conversations, but I'd love to hear some of the things that you all have learned visiting farms that maybe change something about what you do now. Otherwise, we'll take a quick break, and when we return, getting to know our friend, the flea beetle, and maybe during the break, I'll look up what the word friend means. BRB. Oh, nope, never mind. I was way off. Flea beetle, not friend.
Hey, Jesse. Jesse here from Lopez Island, Washington, Zone 8B. I'm proud of my basil and pepper intercropping in pots this year. It worked out really well. Outside, we have more peppers in pots. Sweet alyssum, per your recommendation. And then we got a rose garden out here where we enjoy dinner in the evenings. Love your show. Thanks for all that you do.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Nora, who writes, Flea beetles with an exclamation point, because I think that's deserved. Anyway, flea beetles, they're kicking my butt this season, which has been unusually warm and dry for my region, Belgium, Zone 7B. I've just heard your latest podcast where your answer is healthy soil, but I don't think that holds when there are severe imbalances in pest populations caused by abnormal weather. I'm talking dozens of beetles per leaf, established plants dying, new beds of seedlings eradicated, all coinciding with the hottest and driest spring on record. Do you have any advice for immediate action to save this year's crops? And longer-term action to save future seasons? I don't want to start spraying insecticides like pyrethrin, although we are spraying neem oil plus soap in the evenings on infested Brassicaceae. It isn't reducing the population by much to tackle the future generations. Our plan for next season is to apply beneficial nematodes that can attack the larva in May/June of 2026. For this fall/winter, while the adult flea beetles are overwintering, do I need to get rid of thick mulch cover of grass clippings, which they can hide in? If so, is it better to leave the soil bare to deter overwintering flea beetles or to grow a winter-resistant cover crop? Much of the advice online says to till the soil to disturb the eggs and larvae. Surely there's another solution. Would it help to grow no cruciferous crops for a year to starve them out, or would that just deprive me of food I love without getting rid of the flea beetle problem? End quote. All right, great questions here, and we haven't really done a flea beetle episode yet, so let's do that now. In this segment, let's just talk a bit about the flea beetles themselves and some of the things you should know about them and how they function, because that will inform the last segment when I talk about the management of them. So flea beetles are particularly tough because, unlike, say, potato beetles or cucumber beetles or cabbage moths, etc., they are one of those pests that attacks your plants long before they are established and the plants are able to defend themselves. So soil health in that situation can only do so much. To back up, flea beetles are not just one species. There are a few different types of flea beetles. Each has its preferred host plant or plant family, Solanaceae or Brassicaceae, but also some that just go after eggplants or whatever it may be. Though there are a few generalist species of flea beetles as well that have quite a few plants they like. They are so-called flea beetles because of their flea-like movements, where they can leap but also fly significant distances to evade predation. Interestingly, though, the damage from flea beetles actually begins below ground, where the larvae feed on plant roots. You have probably actually seen flea beetle damage on potatoes, on the potatoes themselves, I mean, when they get that weird sort of spotted scar-like look on their skin. Adults overwinter on plant debris and in the soil, then search for host plants to lay their eggs on. Whether or not getting rid of the debris there is going to greatly affect the flea beetles is hard to say. It may help, it may not. In my mind, spare soil kind of runs more risks than leaving the mulch there. But one of the frustrating things about this pest is that you can do everything right, but if your neighbor harbors them, the flea beetles can just move, jumping, like I said, but also flying long distances to find new host plants, often yours. This epic movement is one thing that makes crop rotation somewhat unhelpful for this beetle, unless, of course, like Nora suggested, you just stop growing certain crops for a while to cut down on infestations. Crop rotation is still a good idea for flea beetles, especially if you are using insect netting, because you don't want to trap those flea beetles inside. So rotation is still important, and in particular after potatoes, but these buggers can move pretty far. But we'll get to actually addressing them in the next segment. Again, once the adults lay their eggs, the larvae can feed on the roots before emerging to feed on the plants themselves. They will jump from host plant to host plant, and a particularly bad infestation will slow plants down or even kill them. For growers of baby greens, this bug is often a challenge because they just make a crop less marketable, which is quite annoying. After they are done or when the season ends, the flea beetles overwinter on plant debris or in nearby grassy areas, then return in the spring when temperatures are more favorable and their host plants start to pop out of the ground. That's when they lay their eggs and start the process over again. It isn't entirely clear in the research how much mulch affects them. According to a few studies I found, the effect of mulch, even plastic and reflective, is fairly inconclusive. One study did find that leaf mold seemed to encourage them more than no mulch at all, but other studies have shown varying results with other mulches. Some research suggests that reflective mulches could have a slight effect, but the cost of the mulches, and not to mention the environmental cost of the mulches, would outweigh the economic benefits. In terms of using mulches, I could not find anything that was super conclusive. So we know that mulches do help in all sorts of other ways that are beneficial to the plant. So I don't think it's a practice I would necessarily avoid to treat my flea beetle issue. Anyway, that's the basic life cycle stuff that you need to know. Up next, we'll discuss the management stuff. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. We know it's peak season, you're busy, but the messages you send now are what drive renewals later. That's why Farmhand is offering free instant access to their farmer-built newsletter builder. No demos, no setup fees, just drop your logo, upload your list, and start sending farm-branded emails that boost sales, engage members, and save you hours each week. Get free access today at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so taking into account everything we discussed in the last segment, some options for flea beetle management. First, crop rotation won't solve the problem for how far these pests can travel, but it will help by forcing the adults to seek out these susceptible plants. So rotate susceptible crops with less susceptible crops where possible. Also, insect netting placed on beds before emergence will reduce or even eliminate the risk of flea beetles to that crop by cutting off access to the host plants for the mama flea beetles to lay their eggs. In fact, studies show that covering is really the best option for managing flea beetle damage. In the colder parts of the year, you can use thicker row covers for this, but in the warmer parts of the year, I recommend dedicated insect nettings that are specifically made for that job because they will allow for more breathing. For flowering crops like eggplants, keep the plants covered until flowering, at which point you will have to remove the cover to allow for pollination, which is where fertility will take over the pest management. If you are having significant issues with flea beetles, row cover or insect netting is going to be a near requisite. And I keep that material really close to the plants, because if there's a bunch of space underneath there, they can, any flea beetles that get in can travel pretty easily. Fertility of those beds will matter significantly as well with the flea beetles. Make sure the soil has been decompacted, maybe broad forking if necessary, but just make sure it's not super compact. Has a nice addition of fresh, healthy compost, and is weed free. Plants that have access to the nutrients they need, and primarily the nitrogen they need, especially for brassicas and potatoes, will fend off these pests more readily than plants that have an additional stressor like dealing with heavy compaction or poor nutrient loads or lack the water that they need. Nora's issue sounds significant. Oftentimes what we observe on our farm is some flea beetle damage to the leaves, almost no matter the soil quality, depending on what plant it is. But so long as the soil is in decent shape, we rarely, if ever, lose a crop to flea beetles, covered or not covered with insect netting. However, aesthetically, we will lose crops because, holy arugula is not the easiest sell. Irrigation and or mulch will be helpful to management via soil health, especially in a case like eggplant where the row cover will eventually have to be removed. Now, in terms of biological treatments, some growers have success using beneficial nematodes, but it can be pricey and you have to keep adding them regularly, like several times a year, perhaps. To me, nematodes are not a great fix because it's so temporary. Healthy soil itself will contain longer-lasting native beneficial nematodes, along with perhaps other predators of this pest, which is another place where the decompaction, the good compost, and the good water delivery will play a big role, lending to the healthy soil argument. The adults are a little harder for the beneficials to control for their mobility, like assassin bugs or whatever are going to have a harder time catching those adults, but having flowers like sweet alyssum, dill, and others will help with the larvae. I've seen some suggestions of catnip, which may have just been cats using the internet, but you could try that too. Also, on the opposite end of the spectrum are trap crops. I'm a little bit iffy on trap crops only because they can be helpful, but they also can breed more of the problem if done wrong. A trap crop is meant to invite the beetles to a party and then you kill them, which is cruel, but that's what the trap crop is intended to be. It's meant to be a trap. If you invite the beetles to a party, like planting a tender brassica eggplant or whatever they like, and then not kill it, well, you just have created a baby boom. Because if you don't do anything to the trap crop or you just mow the trap crop, they're going to split. So if you are going to use a trap crop, you need a termination option, which is perhaps something like the organically approved insecticides available, such as the ones that contain pyrethrin, like Pyganic. On that point, if you were using sprays, I found a good overview on the research that found, quote, the standard rates of Azira, Pyganic, and Entrust significantly reduced flea beetle populations by an overall 73.6, 76.6, and 77.7%, respectively. Neem was less effective at around 30% efficacy, and also some growers experience burning of leaves when using neem, so you have to be careful about following the instructions there. I'm personally not a big spray person, even the organic stuff like those listed above, but you can hit up a place like Arbico Organics for information on which treatments might make the most sense for you and serious infestations. In my opinion, you have to use a range of solutions for this pest. It doesn't just come down to healthy soil, but the healthy soil is part of it. For us, we use insect netting and fertility as our two main approaches, with flowering plants, of course, around the garden, lending a hand. Then, of course, crop rotation. Look at which species of flea beetle you might have and what plants they share or that they like, and try not to feed the flea beetles a plant they like in the same area next year. No perfect answers here, unfortunately, but hopefully there was something helpful in there that I talked about. Otherwise, we're going to take a whole day break and see you all here tomorrow for a very special, fun episode. Don't forget to join the No-Till Growers Premier League Fantasy League. Link will be in the show notes for you soccer nerds. Also, not to be forgotten, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's a great and easy way to help us out. We really appreciate that. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like this one or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of August, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Nutrient Dense Farm, Stefan and Lindsay. Shouts to y'all. New earthworms, cool. All right, so when our plumber, Zeke, who you'll remember from yesterday's story, arrives at his next job, it's an old high school that, has been long out of commission, but some nerds took it over and converted it to some sort of science lab studying soil or some such thing, Zeke recalls. So anyway, Zeke rings the bell and an old man with a lab coat and glasses comes to the door and says, "Are you the plumber?" Now, Zeke, good with customers, tells him, he looks like a plumber, but he just nicely says, "Yes, sir, I hear you have a clog." And the scientist looks nervous. The scientist says, "Yes, it's in the basement, but is there any way you can fix it without coming down there? Could you tell me how to do it?" And Zeke looks at him somewhat confusedly and assures him, "I have to actually look at the pipes to know where to start." So the scientist says, "Okay, give me a few minutes to cover my work," and he heads down the stairs. So Zeke kind of hangs out, thumbs around on, let's say, the no-tillgrowers.com forum for a few minutes, just why not? He's a bit of a gardener. And then about 10 minutes later, the scientist returns and walks Zeke down to the lab where everything is covered in white cloth. It's strange. There's kind of a strange smell emitting, some strange sounds emitting from underneath the cloth. But the scientist shows Zeke the sink, and that is for tomorrow on the pipe piper. I'm just going to roll with that. I like the pipe piper. That's fun to say. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.